For over 1,000 years, it was the most powerful city on earth. Its walls had never fallen. Its empire had survived the collapse of Rome, waves of barbarian invasions, and the rise of Islam. But on May 29, 1453, everything changed. In a single day, an empire that had lasted longer than any other in human history died. Welcome back to Sleek Mind Saga. Today we're witnessing one of history's most dramatic endings, the fall of Constantinople and the death of the Byzantine Empire. This isn't just the story of a city under siege. It's the story of the last Roman emperor, a 21-year-old sultan with impossible dreams, and the moment when the medieval world truly ended. Imagine being the heir to Caesar Augustus and Marcus Aurelius, ruling from the same palace where emperors had governed for over a millennium. Now imagine watching 80,000 enemy soldiers surround your city while you have only 7,000 defenders. This is the story of Constantine XI, the last Roman emperor, and his final desperate stand. This is the end of Rome, the real end, and it's more dramatic than any Hollywood movie. The last Rome. Let's be clear about something. The Byzantine Empire was Rome, not some medieval kingdom pretending to be Roman. It was the Roman Empire, the direct, unbroken continuation of Augustus Caesar's empire, lasting over 1,000 years after the Western Empire fell. When barbarians sacked Rome in 476 CE, the Eastern Roman Empire, later called Byzantine, kept the flame alive. They preserved Roman law, Roman culture, Roman traditions. Their emperors weren't just inspired by Caesar. They were Caesar in an unbroken line stretching back to Augustus himself. By 1453, this last fragment of Rome had been reduced to almost nothing. The mighty empire that once stretched from the Danube to the Euphrates now controlled little more than the city of Constantinople itself. But what a city it was. Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul, was still one of the greatest cities in the world. Built by Constantine the Great in 330 CE as New Rome, it sat at the crossroads of Europe and Asia, controlling the vital sea route between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean. Its massive walls, built by Emperor Theodosius, had protected the city for over 1,000 years. Those walls were legendary, a triple line of fortifications stretching 4 miles across the landward side of the city. The outer wall stood 25 feet high, the inner wall rose 40 feet, with towers reaching 60 feet into the sky. No army had ever breached them, no siege engine had ever broken them. For 1,000 years they had been impregnable. But by 1453, everything was changing. The age of castles and walls was ending. A new technology was rising, gunpowder, and the Ottomans had the biggest guns the world had ever seen. The young Sultan's dream. His name was Mehmed II, but history would remember him as Mehmed the Conqueror. In 1453, he was just 21 years old, younger than most college graduates today. But this wasn't some spoiled prince playing at war. This was a military genius with an obsession. Since childhood, Mehmed had dreamed of one thing: taking Constantinople. Not for gold, not for territory, but for glory. He wanted to be the man who finally conquered the last remnant of Rome. He wanted to succeed where centuries of Muslim rulers had failed. The Ottomans had been trying to take Constantinople for decades. Mehmed's own great-grandfather had besieged it in 1422. His father had considered it, but never tried. The city seemed impossible to conquer, protected by water on 3 sides, by those legendary walls on the 4th, and by a massive chain blocking the entrance to the Golden Horn Harbor. But Mehmed had advantages his predecessors never possessed. He had the largest army in the world, over 80,000 men. He had the Ottoman Navy. And most importantly, he had something that would change warfare forever: the largest cannon ever built. This monster was designed by a Hungarian engineer named Orban. It was 27 feet long, could fire a 1,200-pound stone ball over a mile, and required 60 oxen to move. When it fired, the sound could be heard 10 miles away. It was the medieval world's nuclear weapon. But Mehmed faced a problem. Constantinople wasn't his only enemy. If he failed to take the city quickly, Christian Europe might unite against him. Venice might blockade the Dardanelles. Hungary might attack from the north. He had one chance, one summer, to achieve his dream. The last emperor, Constantine XI. Palaiologos became Emperor of Byzantium in 1449. He was 44 years old, an experienced soldier, and he knew exactly what he was facing. The writing was on the wall. Literally, Ottoman forces surrounded his empire on all sides. His treasury was nearly empty. His army numbered fewer than 5,000 Byzantine soldiers. But Constantine had something his enemies didn't expect. He refused to surrender. Other rulers might have fled, might have negotiated, might have tried to save their own lives. Constantine chose to stay and fight for his city, even knowing it meant certain death. The emperor sent desperate letters across Christian Europe, begging for help. He promised church unity with Rome. The Orthodox and Catholic churches had been divided for 400 years. If only the West would send soldiers. Some help came. 700 Genoese soldiers led by Giovanni Giustiniani, one of the best military engineers in Europe. A few hundred more volunteers from across the Mediterranean. It wasn't nearly enough. Against 80,000 Ottomans, Constantine had maybe 7,000 defenders total. Byzantines, Genoese, Venetians, and a handful of others. The greatest city in the world would be defended by fewer men than attend most high school football games. Constantine knew the odds. His advisors begged him to flee while there was still time. Ships could have smuggled him out through the Ottoman blockade. He could have lived to fight another day, maybe reclaim the throne with Western help. His answer was simple: "It is impossible for me to leave. I pray to God that I may die before I see this city in enemy hands." The siege begins. April 6, 1453. The Ottoman army arrived at the walls of Constantinople like a medieval avalanche. 80,000 men, janissaries, sipahis, irregulars from across the empire, volunteers drawn by the promise of plunder. Their camps stretched as far as the eye could see. Mehmed positioned his monster cannon directly facing the weakest section of the wall, the area around the gate of St. Romanos. Every day, the great gun would fire 2 or 3 times, each shot shaking the ground like an earthquake, each impact cracking the ancient stones a little more. But the Byzantines fought back with desperate ingenuity. At night, they would repair the damage with rubble, wood, earth, anything they could find. They hung leather hides and bales of wool on the walls to absorb the impact of cannonballs. They dug deep ditches behind the walls to catch falling stones. Constantine himself fought on the walls every day, inspiring his men by personal example. When a section of wall collapsed, he was there helping to rebuild it. When Ottoman assault troops charged, he was there with his sword drawn. The last Roman emperor wasn't commanding from a palace, he was dying with his soldiers. The siege became a race against time. Every day, Mehmed's cannons did more damage. Every day, the walls grew weaker. But every day the siege continued was another day for Christian relief forces to arrive. Both sides knew the city couldn't hold forever. The question was whether help would come first. Then Mehmed made his masterstroke. The Golden Horn Harbor was protected by a massive chain stretching from Constantinople to the Genoese colony of Galata. No ship could enter the harbor, but Mehmed did something unprecedented in military history. He moved his ships overland. In a single night, Ottoman crews hauled 70 ships up and over the hills behind Galata, then launched them into the Golden Horn behind the chain. By morning, Byzantine defenders woke to see enemy ships in their own harbor. The city was now surrounded on all sides. The final assault. By late May, the situation was hopeless. The walls were crumbling under constant bombardment. Food was running low. No relief force was coming. Christian Europe had abandoned Constantinople to its fate. Mehmed made one final offer: surrender the city and all inhabitants would be spared. Constantine could rule as an Ottoman vassal, keep his palace, even keep his title. All he had to do was open the gates. Constantine's reply became legend. To surrender the city is beyond my authority or anyone else's who lives in it. For all of us, after taking the mutual decision, shall die willingly rather than live. May 28, 1453, the night before the final assault. Constantine made his last tour of the walls, saying goodbye to his commanders. He attended one final service at the Hagia Sophia, the greatest cathedral in the Orthodox world. Catholics and Orthodox prayed together for the first time in centuries, united in their approaching doom. That night, Constantine addressed his remaining soldiers. "Noble lords, I see that our number is small, but do not be distressed by this, for with few but brave men, many victories have been won. What can we do against such a multitude? We can die well and leave a great name behind us." May 29, 1453, 1:30 a.m. The final assault began with a sound like the end of the world. Every Ottoman cannon fired simultaneously. Then came the war cries of 80,000 men charging the walls. The irregular troops went first. Expendable men meant to exhaust the defenders. For 2 hours, the Byzantines held them back. Then came the Anatolian regulars, professional soldiers, better armed and disciplined. Again, the walls held, but barely. Constantine fought at the Gate of St. Romanos, his purple imperial robes making him a target for every Ottoman archer. Finally, at dawn came the Janissaries, the Ottoman elite troops, the best soldiers in the world. Fresh, disciplined, fanatical in their loyalty to the Sultan. They hit the walls like a steel hammer. Giovanni Giustiniani, the Genoese commander, was wounded by a cannonball and carried from the walls. His men, seeing their leader fall, began to retreat. The Ottoman war cry went up. "The city is ours." The death of an empire. At the moment of final collapse, Constantine XI did something that echoed through history. He threw off his imperial regalia, the purple robes, the golden crown that marked him as heir to Augustus Caesar. He drew his sword and charged into the Ottoman ranks like an ordinary soldier. His last words, according to witnesses, were, "The city has fallen and I am still alive." Then he vanished into the chaos of battle. His body was never definitively identified. The last Roman emperor died as he had lived, fighting for his city. The Ottomans poured through the broken walls like a flood. What followed was the traditional 3 days of plunder that Islamic law allowed after a city was taken by force. Thousands of civilians were killed or enslaved. Churches were looted. Libraries containing irreplaceable Greek and Roman manuscripts were burned. The great cathedral of Hagia Sophia, which had been the center of Orthodox Christianity for nearly 1,000 years, was converted to a mosque. The building still stands today, but the empire that built it was gone forever. Mehmed himself entered the city in triumph. At age 21, he had achieved what no Muslim ruler before him could accomplish. He had conquered the last remnant of Rome. He declared himself Caesar of Rome. The irony was complete. A Muslim Turkish sultan now claimed the title of the Roman emperors. But the victory came at a cost that few anticipated. With the fall of Constantinople, the traditional trade routes to Asia were now controlled by a hostile power. European merchants were forced to find new ways to reach the spices and silk of the East. This led directly to the Age of Exploration. Columbus, Vasco da Gama, and all the others were looking for ways around the Ottoman Empire. In trying to recreate Alexander's empire, Mehmed inadvertently created the modern world. The end of Rome. The fall of Constantinople marked more than the end of a city or even an empire. It was the end of antiquity itself. The Roman Empire, in one form or another, had existed for over 2,000 years. Its end marked the true beginning of the modern age. Greek scholars fled west, carrying with them ancient texts and knowledge that had been preserved in Constantinople's libraries. This influx of classical learning helped fuel the Renaissance in Western Europe. Ironically, the death of the last remnant of ancient Rome helped revive interest in classical civilization. The psychological impact was enormous. For over a millennium, Constantinople had been the queen of cities, the greatest metropolis in the Christian world. Its fall sent shockwaves across Europe. If Constantinople could fall, what was safe? The medieval world's greatest symbol of permanence had proven to be mortal after all. The Ottoman Empire would go on to become one of the greatest powers in world history, controlling much of southeastern Europe, Western Asia, and northern Africa for the next 400 years. Istanbul, as Constantinople was renamed, remained one of the world's greatest cities. But something intangible was lost forever. The last direct link to Caesar Augustus was broken. The final heir of Constantine the Great was dead. Rome, the Rome of the Caesars, of the legions, of 1,000 years of glory, was finally, truly, completely gone. The fall of Constantinople teaches us that nothing lasts forever, not even an empire that had survived for over 1,000 years. But it also shows us how individuals can transcend their circumstances through courage and principle. Constantine XI could have fled, he could have surrendered, he could have saved his own life and lived comfortably as an Ottoman vassal. Instead, he chose to die as a Roman emperor, fighting for his city to the very end. In the end, perhaps that's the most Roman thing of all, to face impossible odds with dignity, to choose honor over survival, to die well rather than live in shame. The Byzantine Empire fell, but its last emperor's courage echoes through history. The walls of Constantinople had stood for 1,000 years, but they couldn't stand forever. Empires rise and fall, cities crumble, but the memory of those who face the darkness with courage, that endures. If this story of courage, tragedy, and the end of an ancient world captivated you, please like and subscribe for more Dark History Chronicles. Next week, we'll explore the Spanish conquest of the Aztec Empire, another civilization-ending collision between old and new worlds. Until then, remember, even when empires fall, human dignity can endure forever.